I think the numbers are something like 40% of them, 30 to 40% of them are looking to retire in the next 5 to 10 years. If you take somebody that's new in the industry, no matter how much education or training they've had, and you ask them the question like, okay, here's this hospital we're going to build. Where do we start?
Hi, welcome to Capterra's Guest Network series, where leading business voices share how the right software helps you work smarter and move faster. I'm Laura Burgess, content analyst at Capterra. Today, we're looking at what construction firms are facing in 2026, including growth expectations, external pressures, and the broader macroeconomic environment. To discuss this, I'm joined by Jim Rogers, founder of the Construction Collaborative and a longtime educator in construction management and safety. Hi, Jim. Welcome.
Hi, Laura. Thanks for having me here.
So, Jim, our survey data shows that most construction companies expect growth or stability in 2026. So, does this align with what you're currently seeing within the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some different data floating around out there as in terms of exactly how much growth we're expecting and how much labor we're going to need to add this year. But you put it all together and there's no question. I think everybody expects this to be a growth year for the construction industry, for sure.
Thanks, Jim. At the same time, many firms are still grappling with people and skills challenges. So that brings me to my next question. Labor shortages and costs are major external pressures for construction firms. So what can companies do to enhance workplace readiness?
Well, I think labor is going to be one of the big issues that we see this year and into the coming decade, really. We're even starting to see people outside of the construction industry acknowledge construction labor as an issue, right? We're starting to see people like the chairman of NVIDIA commenting that AI might be bottlenecked by construction because construction needs more labor. We're seeing, major publications write news stories about all these opportunities in construction and, whether it's trades or construction management. And, while we've talked about that internally within the industry for years now, it's interesting to see all of these external people that rely on the construction industry to sort of start the process by building their facilities start to realize that we have some labor issues. We see different numbers floating around out there in terms of, we need in the US, for example, we need to add anywhere from 350,000 to 500,000 additional people in the construction industry just in 2026. Again, those are two big numbers. They seem like they're a long ways apart, but really it doesn't matter what the number is. It's just a lot of people. We need to add a lot of people. I think that some of the things that the industry has already started to do and really needs to continue with are things like improving our image. If you look back at some other types of surveys that talk to young people about careers in construction, not a lot of young people consider construction as a career. A lot of them consider it as a temporary kind of job, something that gets them to the next play. And one of the things I think the industry really needs to continue to work on is changing that image. There are lots of us, me included, that started in the construction industry out of high school and have made a lifelong, very good career out of it. So just that perception and that image, I think, is something that the industry needs to continue to work on. I think some of the other things are just that recruiting effort. How do we portray ourselves to other people in the industry? I think we're starting to see some interest and maybe some acceptance of people that are changing sort of mid-career. Maybe they're a little later in life, they're in their 30s, and they want to do something different. Maybe their job is being replaced by AI, or maybe they're being, they're threatened to be replaced by AI, and so they're starting to look at, well, would construction be a good sort of mid-career shift for me? Is that, are my skills transferable? And I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people around this issue, and if you project manage in the technology industry, a lot of those skills are transferable over to the construction industry. And I think the construction industry needs to start maybe understanding that a lot of the skills that we have that we maybe think are unique to us are also skills that other industries have. And so those other industries where people are looking to make career shifts are possible talent pools for us in the construction industry. Yes, they need to learn the technical side of our business, but some of those soft skills and management skills are certainly transferable.
Yeah, that makes sense. So now if we were to look more broadly at the economy, so macroeconomic pressures are also high on the construction leaders list. So how are rising costs and economic uncertainty trickling down into the day-to-day operations?
Some of that has changed so rapidly and made so many swings just over the last few months, or the last part of 2025, that it almost gets difficult to answer that question. Things like rising costs, tariff uncertainties, um, supply chain issues, those those will always impact the construction industry. What the scale of that impact is in 2026, I think, is still a little hard to predict. The I think a lot of people were really concerned about rising costs in some of the construction inputs, and I feel like over as we entered 2026, some of those concerns have actually uh, gone down a little bit. Some of the costs, I feel like, have started to stabilize, depending on which type of product you're looking at. But uh, tariff uncertainties have sort of leveled out a little bit. They could certainly come back and hit the industry hard. But I think that I think that this broad acknowledgement sort of overall in many industries that are going to drive construction growth, data centers, healthcare, chip manufacturing, and then all of the infrastructure that has to be built to support that. It just is interesting to me that I feel like all of a sudden we're starting to see this broader acknowledgement that, hey, in order to have these things continue, in order to have these things progress, in order to build data centers and infrastructure and power generation, uh, we need to make sure that the construction industry is stable. And so, maybe that's factoring in and helping us a little bit. I do think that our supply chains are maybe a little more complicated than they used to be, or at least we've seen some acknowledgement within the construction industry that maybe we haven't done as good a job managing supply chains in the past as we need to, and sort of recognizing that in the construction industry we need to do a little better job of focusing on that actual supply chain. Where does this product actually start? Whereas in the past, I think the industry has been a little shallow at looking at supply chain and concentrated more on where am I getting this product from, even though the answer to that might be one thing, but the answer to where is that product really coming from might be entirely different. And so I think that firms that are really trying to ready themselves and make sure that they're not held up by rising material costs in one part of the world, or supply chain issues, delivery issues in another part of the world, are really starting to focus on that supply chain and look at where their products actually come from and how they move through the system to finally get to their projects. And I think that that's probably an important skill moving forward as we really see growth in the construction industry, and the growth pressure that we're going to see is, I think, going to be more intense than it's ever been in the past. And I think that the smart firms will really start to have a better handle on their supply chain, so they understand where their materials are coming from, what kinds of macroeconomic factors and what kinds of things that are happening in the world could affect them getting that material, because they have a better understanding of where it actually comes from. I think that's going to be really important as we move forward.
Given these combined pressures, so labour shortages, inflation, tariffs, how should construction leaders think about resilience in 2026?
In terms of resilience, again, I think really being able to manage your supply chain is important. And and I can elaborate on that a little bit. We have a general contractor kind of overseeing the project, whether it's a mega project or a smaller project. I think that to keep projects moving, the smart, prepared contractor, the general contractor that's really looking to be resilient, is going to stop looking at, well, I'm hiring this subcontractor or trade contractor to install these components or these products, and instead start asking questions of them along the lines of, where are you getting the products from? Do you have a backup? Do you have these in inventory? Are you waiting on just-in-time delivery? I think resilience at a project level starts to rely on the general contractor digging a little bit deeper into their trade contractor management and their supply chain management. And I think that's going to be important. I think that there's going to be more pressure on trade contractors. So the ones that are actually supplying the labor out there in the field, I think there's going to be more pressure on those trade contractors to really pay a little more attention and put a little more focus on retaining their workforce, right? So in terms of resiliency, if you lose a big portion of your workforce, we know there's a labor shortage. Replacing them quickly is going to be really difficult. So I think for a trade contractor, or the type of construction company that employs skilled trades and labor, their path towards resiliency probably is more preventative. They really need to focus on keeping those people and not losing them to other industries or other contractors. That's how they're going to stay resilient. I think that, and one more issue, I think, when we look at the labor shortage, one of the things that I've been talking about recently is, not just those numbers that we've talked about. We need 400,000 more workers in 2026. It's not just the numbers; it's maybe where those numbers are coming from, and the fact that a big deficit in those numbers is being generated by our retiring workforce, and that probably scares me in terms of progress and resiliency more than anything, because it's not just that we need to attract new people, it's that we need to attract more people, because our seasoned workforce is, I think the numbers are something like 40% of them, 30 to 40% of them, are looking to retire in the next 5 to 10 years. And that scares me in terms of progress, productivity, and resiliency, just because they're the ones that hold the knowledge, right? They're the ones that really know how we build things. If you take somebody that's new in the industry, no matter how much education or training they've had, and you ask them the question like, okay, here's this hospital we're going to build. Where do we start? They look through the drawings, and the drawings don't tell you where to start. What tells you where to start is that skilled construction manager or superintendent that's done this numerous times before, that knows, with this set of variables, I need to start here. And with this set of variables, I need to start here. That's who we're losing. And that's what that's who we're losing to retirement. And that's what scares me a little bit more than just those raw labor numbers. And again, in terms of resiliency and what do we do for the future, construction companies really need to be focused on making sure we transfer that knowledge from those people that are getting set to retire to our younger workforce. I think that's one of the biggest things. Construction companies that employ labor, that's one of the biggest things they need to do for resiliency, is get that knowledge transferred before it all retires.
Thanks for sharing your insights on the pressures shaping construction and how companies can be resilient in a challenging market. We hope these insights help construction teams navigate change, work smarter, and think about their software choices. We'll be back shortly with our next segment.